Welcome everyone to this discussion today on climate opportunity. The harsh realities that we're seeing in the world today have reached a point in which we have to start discussing what exactly each and every one of us can do. Because each and every one of us hold a piece of the solution that is needed to address the changing climate. And as a result of this, it is therefore important that we have these conversations, so much so that at least we can contribute our fair share. In 2020 alone, climate-induced disasters uh, costed the globe up to 210 billion US dollars. But this distress only built on what was already happening and will continuously disproportionately impact people who, as we speak today, are currently experiencing social, structural, and systemic inequities and marginalization. The science gets louder and louder every year. And as we're speaking, the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change with a UNEP emissions gap report all pointing to the fact that the world is headed towards bridging the 1.5 degree warming threshold. And when you put this within the context of Africa, this makes the prognosis even worse. Africa is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world. With this, the escalation of socioeconomic misery, which, as we speak today, is already at breaking point, is guaranteed. This is bad news. Yes, it is, because Africa, as we speak today, have over 257 million people who go to bed every night. Tonight, we'll have over 257 million people going to bed without food, with their stomach aching of hunger. Over 60 million children are malnourished. 12 million young people get into the labor market every year without jobs. And given that these young people, over 60% of them, constitute the population of the continent and are projected to face the most significant expansion of working age population of about 450 million more people in the next 80 years. But when you look at all these statistics that we have and juxtapose them within the reality of today, the negative narratives of calamity seems to overshadow sometimes the positive realities that do exist, though in pockets. Doom and gloom seems to be the mainstay of climate change. And of course, making us sometimes not to project also opportunities under the changing climate. We know that climate change is already causing emotional wounds in people's minds, especially the young people. A study recently shows a rise in climate anxiety, which is becoming a medical condition that drives apathy towards life, especially among young people who see no hope into the future. What we urgently need to do, regardless of which space in which we are or which profession, is to start looking at how do we reshape the narrative. Yes, the weight of the climate challenge is on our shoulders. Yes, the challenges and the impacts are being felt by each and every one of us wherever we are. Whether we're first under the barrage of heat waves or hurricanes or droughts or floods, we're affected in one way or the other. And in the course, we are even losing lives of our loved ones. So what urgently needs to happen is that the narrative of climate action needs to be recalibrated to divest immediately from projecting liability alone to start projecting opportunities, especially for enterprise and socio-economic progress that can be tapped in this climate challenge. And what needs to happen is that this needs to start from us projecting her incomes, her enterprise opportunities, her business opportunities on diverse levels can actually be taken to combat climate change, while in the process, energize and inspire young people to start seeing themselves as solutions providers and not victims only of the changing climate. Because an African proverb tells us that every adversity carries with it the seeds of equal or greater benefit, so are the opportunities that lie in the risk posed by the changing climate, especially in the African continent and the entire world. And the next question is, what then needs to be done? Simple. We need a visionary approach, an approach that can turn these challenges into opportunities, what I call climate premiership, which is how we can unlock opportunities, leveraging the challenges we face. Yes, humbled by them, but at the same time inspired. And it's simply about looking beyond the turmoil of risk and focusing on selflessly devising solutions using what is accessible to us wherever we are. It is about co-creating competitive solutions to the challenges we face. Climatepreneurship is about understanding the needs of society and working with that very society to address those challenges that the society have, starting with what we have. It is about being selfless enough to focus on the quest for solutions. And more importantly, it is about retooling our skills. Despite our educational and social background, we should retool our skills with a very clear goal of turning climate-induced challenges into opportunities. And this is the logic behind what I call innovative volunteerism, which is founded on a very simple premise, simple idea that we have to use what we have in terms of our abilities, aptitudes, skills, and talents, and ongoing work, not what we don't have. We use what we have, not what we hope to have. And in the course of doing so, continuously retool our skill to offer value, because value is what is needed. And refining our skills to do so is the game changer and the best formidable strategy. These aspects are already being tested across the entire African continent today through the work we do. And what we are learning from all these processes is that novelty and creativity needs to become the center stage of climate action solutions. We cannot use knee-jerk approaches to respond to drought and floods and expect results to be sustainable. It needs a mindset change to do things differently and at the same time provide alternatives to substitute what might work for a short term but bring solutions that can last for a long term. We're talking in a continent today when we have over 257 million people who go to bed hungry. Yes, the continent has also been hit with the barrage of other externalities. The Ukraine-Russian war that have seen food prices increase. At the same time, plunging the continent not just into further food insecurity and the volatility in markets have seen inflationary levels never seen before. But there have been no discussion around alternatives, especially when it comes to food. Over 50% of the continent imports wheat. But there is cassava, which is a climate resilient crop. There have been no discussion around using a crop that can produce over 300 different products, and at the same time is a climate resilient crop that can grow during droughts and floods. So the question then is, what are the accessible opportunities that are leveraged or are not leveraged? And if they are to be leveraged through the lens of enterprising solutions, there could be jobs created for young people and at the same time, more food on the table and more money in more pockets of citizens. So is there a mismatch? And that's what we're discussing here today. And please put up your hands if you want to provide perspective or ask a question. And that's what we are all here to do. So I'm looking at whether anyone has put up his hand so that at least I can give you the floor to contribute. Feel free. This is a conversation to ensure that at least we can leverage climate opportunity under this changing climate. Yes, please. I've given the floor to colleagues. Please go ahead and ask your question. Please put up your hand and ask a question. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richard. Dokime here, all the way from Southern Africa, Namibia, Windhoek. I just have,
Wonderful. Welcome.
thank you so much. This is a great opportunity. The moment that I saw climate opportunity, I was very much intrigued by that topic. But my question is as follows. Um, as a youth who is active in this so-called fifth or rather fourth industrial revolution in Africa, whereby we're seeing a boom in agro tech
Mhm.
businesses amongst the youth and women. To what extent, or rather, I mean, we know that in terms of policy or legislative frameworks, in Africa, we more often than not have quite a substantive amount of legislative frameworks which sort of try to accommodate here and there. But in terms of implementation mechanisms, it's what is actually lacking. If you look at the African Continental Free Trade Area, what kind of mechanisms are being built, for example, through the AFCFTA for youth and women to leverage this climate opportunity in terms of capacity building and growth and development of small and medium enterprises. To what extent is the youth and women element going to benefit from this climate opportunity? And how about the awareness aspect also? So I hope you've picked quite a little bit from my question, even though it was a bit vague.
No, I mean, it's a very important question, and I think is coming at the right time. Because if you look across the entire African continent today, let me start from the perspective of the Paris Agreement ratification and the submission of the nationally determined contribution. 52 out of 54 African countries have submitted, ratified, and now 45 countries are updating their indices. Most African governments are putting in place climate legislation. Most countries, about five of them, have climate acts. Then, when it comes now to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is worth over 3.4 trillion US dollars, actually one of the biggest markets, common market that is going to exist in the entire world. Most countries have ratified that. But Africa is an agrarian continent, especially sub-Saharan African. So if you were to look at the continent in terms of how trade can happen and which aspects of trade can actually take into consideration or be at the highest level, it's agro products. And so if over 65% of the entire African continent workforce is in the agricultural sector, and the continent at the same time have a market with 1.4 billion people and have an opportunity to tap into this 3.4 trillion. When you juxtapose this with the reality of the continent, agricultural production in the continent, in the course of producing food, loses 48 billion US dollars because of inefficiency in the entire growth value chain. Post harvest losses is the biggest menace. Then what will Africa trade? That's the first question. And the answer is this trading of food products across the continent will have to be compliant to specific standards and levels of adherence to specific um, benchmarks. And it therefore means that to add value, that value needs to be added in a way that it's aligning to standards that have been developed by national bureaus of standards. And this will need input. For example, to dehydrate cassava to the requisite moisture content of 13, you need a solar dryer to do so. To be able to add value to tomatoes, you need cool solar systems to be able to store them so that they don't get spoiled. So, climate action solutions from an enterprising perspective will become center, and these solutions and inputs will be provided by youth, and therefore retooling youth skills to be able to do so become important. And then our mothers in communities produce their food and waste and get wasted because they don't have these inputs. So imagine a mother in a small village in Windhoek or in southern Namibia, where you are, for example, growing her vegetables, but those vegetables get lost because she doesn't have a simple solar dryer to dry them. then she ends up losing food and losing money. But if she was to be decentralized, that solar dryer to where she is to dry her vegetable, even if she doesn't have a market, she can be able to store it for at least 6 months before it gets spoiled. And these are simple things that need to be factored in. But to develop these solar dryers, young people will be doing it, and that means they will put money in their pocket. That will mean that mothers will be able to put food on the table and also more money in their more pocket. But they will need policy incentives. And the policy incentives will not come from on top, they will not fall down from on top of a tree. They need to then be informed by these pockets of success stories that are already happening across the continent. And it is us citizens, regardless of what we do, to bring data to what is working and force legislators to put in place physical incentives like tax breaks for material to make solar dryers, tax breaks for materials or for importation of parts of solar fridges. These can be done and this is happening, but not at scale. And then from the blockchain perspective, most of our communities today are informal. I have argued so many times, and I've never really listened to, that Africa is an informal setting continent, whether we like it or not. The narrative comes sometimes that yes, Africa is urbanizing fast. Yes, it is urbanizing, but where do the people end up? They end up in slums. That is not urbanization. Those in slums that end up do not have access to the amenities that urbanization bring. And therefore, the narrative needs to be corrected. So the point I'm making is that these people in informal sector, the informality of the African continent means we need to tap into structures that are accessible to these people. And these are communal cooperatives. They have different names across different parts of the continent. In West Africa, they call it Jangi, or some things from Cameroon, where I come from, or Chamas in East Africa. That then means those accessible structures need to be leveraged so that at least resources and support can be channeled in a traceable and more accountable way to reach the people that matter. And engaging these will then make sure that even after to be effectively delivered and to make sure that it also cascades down to leverage on what people do at the ground level through the climate lens from an opportunity perspective, we'll have to leverage on these structures so that the benefits of these happens mostly in the informal sector as well as the formal sector. Thank you. Over. I think I gave room to the colleague. I think I can't see my screen. Is it? I think it's Anne. Yes, Anne. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think I hope you can hear me. I feel these are very important discussions that we need to have, and I do agree that, for instance, solutions for productive uses of energy within the agriculture sector are very important. And even as we have, and even as we think about even the role of youth, the role of women within these sectors, I feel like it's so important for us to kind of start by looking at what resources we have in general as Africans, and what we can bring to the table. But the reality is that there's a lot that we might need from the global north, and one of these things that we may need is technology. And I don't know, now that you have an opportunity to sit at UNEP and to look at things from that particular perspective, I'm not sure what you feel is possible to ensure that there's accountability by states, and there's also commitment by a number of other actors within the development sector to make sure that they give this particular technology to the global south in a way that is fair and in a way that is equitable. So I don't know what your recommendation would be, even as we think about some of the solutions for productive uses of energy in agriculture sector, for clean cooking, and also for adaptation. So this is just back to you, Dr. Munang. What do you feel are some of these ways that we can achieve that equity, that equality, and get technology in that particular way?
Yeah, thank you very much, Anne, for that. Firstly, I am having this discussion as a citizen of the world and of our African continent. So I'm giving my perspectives here. That's one, and also knowledge from the work we do. Two is, let me start, and I might not say what you wanted to hear, but I think we are here to learn, right? So this is the point. I've argued this, and this is my perspective before I get to the broader part of your question. We have over 920 million African citizens who depend on clean cooking. We have over 620 million African citizens who are energy impoverished. And then on top of that, like I said earlier, we have the continent losing food worth 48 billion US dollars. So the question then is, to be able to take our mothers off from depending on firewood and charcoal, and I like to use this example because it's relatable and it's realistic across all corners of the continent. We need to start to think contextual solutions that do exist, but we never really take them into consideration. Let me take the aspect of clean cooking. Turning agricultural waste into fuel briquettes is happening across the continent. We've trained young people. We see them even doing this. We've actually documented scientific evidence to showcase that briquettes are 2 to 4 times effective and efficient and cheaper than charcoal, and they do not emit, they do not pollute, and at the same time will help save our mothers where 700,000 of them die each and every year. That's one point. Young people are fabricating clean cook stoves, even making them more efficient where these briquettes are being used for cooking. Why don't we focus to build on these prototypes and make them become the norm and not the exception? Why should technology only come from elsewhere before we believe that we have something? And that takes me to the second point. Zai, a very indigenous technique that has been used in the continent and especially in the Sahel, which is a very simple agricultural technique where holes are dug on the ground and interspersed with organic manure. When it pours and it rains heavily and seeds are planted, have proven to produce yields over 500%. This then means there are solutions that if they are deployed and brought to scale by more investment in them, the continent will definitely build resilience. But these are always silent when there are discussions. There is absolutely nothing wrong for technology to be adapted and brought to build on what exists. But there have been no discussion on how do we use what we have to get what we don't have. And why I'm bringing this up is that if we continuously focus on technologies that the continent doesn't have, while ignoring technologies that the continent do have, instead of discussing it from the perspective of how do we bring what we have to scale, in the course of doing so, create incentives, create physical incentives, provide support, both monetary capacity development support to inspire and somehow capacitate our young people to become champions on this. We will continuously be on this narrative, which I call a sorry narrative of waiting and nothing would ever really come. So to your question on strategy, I've given. To your question on what needs to be done, I've given. But I am in no way trying to say that technology discussion should stop. No, I'm saying you are better off as a continent building on what you have and then closing the gaps with what you don't have. And at the same time, leveraging indigenous solutions that can fit within context. Because, for example, if a new technology really comes and there is no capacity and people are not trained to understand it, and it then gets spoiled, who loses? It's the same argument with e-mobility at the moment. What we say is, excellent idea, brilliant. E-mobility is needed. It can be decentralized even to communities to connect farmers to markets. Excellent. But can we start to put legislation in place that ensures that every community can have a charging point and start training young people so that they can fix the batteries and even operate those charging areas? If that doesn't happen, beautiful technology will be there, but at the end of the day, we may end up going nowhere. Thank you. Yes, Chebet?
Thank
Please
you.
introduce yourself. Yeah, where you're coming from, and so that at least because we have actually we have the United Nations here, people from all across the world. Go ahead.
Thank you, Richard. I don't know whether I'm loud enough.
Very loud enough, 500%.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so privileged to be in this platform. I'm called Chebet Brian. I come from Uganda. I'm sorry I joined the space late, but as you know, more internet concerns, I'm so passionate. I have just something, a statement to make through. I don't know what you'll respond.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, please. This is our space.
Yes, yes. So, I'm passionate about climate education most times, and when I analyze from my first of all, me personally, I was distorted by this climate catastrophes, and I was unable to continue with my education. And later on in life, I found out I have to, bridge that gap to allow other people to have their fortunes in life without these climate disruptions. So basically, the statement I wanted to put through is the climate education that we always advocate for. As in, like, even when you check my page, my Twitter page, you realize I have a pinned tweet. As we head to the next COP27 in Egypt, I was emphasizing the need for climate education. I was trying to make a point that can climate education be a magic stick to the younger people, especially when it comes to getting green solutions and getting for source of energy. Can climate education incorporated become the solution in the next 10 or 20 years to solve the energy crisis and solve the increasing carbon emissions which are happening all over the world? That was my simple question I wanted to put forward. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Thanks, Chebet. And the question is spot on. All questions are spot on here today, and that is the reality. The truth is this: you could not be able to, because climate change is a development issue. It's an issue of health, of economy, of justice, etc. So you cannot address it without putting it on the vision of national development. And to put this within the vision of national development, it must be integrated into the curriculum of every school. And this cannot be just integrated. Well, please mute yourself if you are not speaking, just in case. Um, like I said, climate change, especially climate action, needs to be integrated into the educational curriculum, because you cannot be able to drive transformational development, especially now that climate change is a development issue and cross-cutting on every sector and aspect, without making it become part and parcel of your national development. And integrating this to school curriculum is key. But it cannot just be integrated to be taught about just the understanding of climate change. It must be integrated, because as we're speaking today, the truth is this: a lot of people care about climate change, but they don't really bother much about it until they see what is in it for them when it comes to addressing it. And so, what we need is to integrate climate entrepreneurship within. It should become the norm and compulsory for every curriculum, from primary, secondary to the university level, masters and even PhDs, so that the solutions to the changing climate, especially from contextual, realistic, simple solutions like how to turn agricultural waste into briquettes, become part and parcel. So climatepreneurship should become a compulsory subject. And for this to happen, it will not just happen by us talking about it. It will also happen by citizens holding their legislators and saying, using, showcasing what they're already doing. Like we've seen young people who are developing solar dryers, who are developing, using that data to say, look, this is our way of life. We will need this to be integrated to school curriculum. We need a legislation on this. We need physical incentives on this, so that everybody, whether you are doing economics, geography, geology, physics, chemistry, doesn't matter, everybody will take a course on climatepreneurship. So people can tap into the opportunities that are inherent in this. And that way you will start to nurture a mindset that is not only tapping into climate opportunity, but that is actually preparing them to start looking for alternative ways to create enterprises for themselves that then bring them extra income. And you will notice that your climate agenda and climate development pathway will be driven with very little effort because each and everyone will be part and parcel of it, doing it to put money in pockets and food on the table. And that is what is currently not being the norm in the continent today. And I believe conversations like these can engineer and drive this perspective. So you are spot on. So that is how it is. And we have used the work we are doing to be able to integrate climate action into school curriculum. University of Nasarawa State University in Nigeria, doing work and working with young people through the Emirates of Nasarawa. What happened was that the local governance structure mobilized women and young people. Those young people were trained to turn agricultural waste into fuel briquettes. That was replacing charcoal in households of mothers. And as a result of that, the data that came out of that was then leveraged, and Nasarawa State University have developed a curriculum on climatepreneurship out of that work. And now, for the first time, there is a curriculum on climatepreneurship that is going to be taught at the master's, at the first degree and master's level in Nasarawa State University. That's progress. Now, the Sago University in Botswana is on the 19th of October going to launch a Center for Climate Change and Entrepreneurship that has been inspired by the work that we do. And that is progress. Though happening at bit small steps, is actually showcasing that the inherent opportunities in climate, when showcased practically and value out of it is seen, private, public sector can pick it up, and that is the right direction and the right messaging. That climate opportunity is portable, but it must be tapped, and that you will start to see legislative processes picking up from this. Yes, Queen.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Dr. Richard. Thank you so much for this amazing space. I had connected before, but I dropped because of a few challenges with my phone. So yeah, like I said, this is a very important conversation, and when I saw this topic, I think I was amongst the first 5 people to join the spaces because I think it's climate change. This is a global issue that requires collective action. This is a collective action problem, requires each and every one of us to lend a voice, but also to just be part of the action. I believe we have talked a lot about climate change. We continue to talk in these big conferences, the COP27s of this world. And I think we have done a lot of talk. I remember the COP26. I was part of the online digital influencers communicating what is happening at the COP26 via my Twitter page, and just maybe telling Kenyans and those online what's happening there. However, it ended there at the tweets. And working in the agriculture sector, I would like to just say that I like what the private sector here in Kenya is doing with taking action to address issues around climate change. The former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, was very vocal here in Kenya to address, and was very, very on point in his commitment to addressing issues around climate change, in just ensuring that we build resilience and we enhance adaptive capacities to address the impacts of climate change. I work in the private sector and in the agriculture sector. I can say that farmers here in Kenya have taken it upon themselves to go through the regenerative agriculture practices, and it's like a personal initiative. The conferences are important. We talk and talk and talk, and sometimes these conferences don't even involve the people who suffer the most the brunt of climate change. Very few farmers are invited to the decision tables. Few players at the bottom of the pyramid, and they are they're the most affected with climate change are never invited to these conversations. And so private sectors have taken it upon themselves to be to lead in taking action against what seems to be killing us at the end of the day. Look at the temperatures here in Nairobi. We've been having very cold days and nights. Sometimes it's too hot, and you can't. The sun is almost on your head, and I can imagine these are just the initial effects of climate change. And so we need to break the cycle. We need to come up not just on these kinds of spaces, but in action. Let's break the cycle. Let's implement whatever we have in our discussions. Let's look at how we can improve on agricultural productivity, because if we do not have food, then we no longer have people in this planet that we so-called planet. There's no planet B. Why can't we not take care of our planet A and do the right thing, and perhaps not just talk, but make some steps towards addressing this? And so, Dr. Richard, I would like to ask, my organization, you can see from my bio, we work with WFP, we work with FAO in terms of just helping farmers to take up these resilient agricultural practices to ensure that they continue to be productive while using practices that will ensure that they get something out of this disastrous weather and climatic patterns that we have. So, what is the United Nations UNEP doing in terms of, because you sit at the UNEP, I believe, the Nairobi office, what are you guys doing in terms of ensuring that farmers um, are more into these resilience practices when it comes to food productivity? What areas are you looking at? What countries are you looking at in Africa or even globally in terms of ensuring that we are a resilient, a growing community, and our farmers are up to date with the information that they need to ensure that they continue producing and feeding the world?
Yeah, thank you very much, Queen, for that perspective and for the good work you've updated that you are doing. Excellent. Before I get to your question, what you've said is quite very true. This is my take on what you said, which is very, very correct. We need we need everybody, right? We need advocacy, we need meetings, but what is more important is that we need to move from excellence in policies to excellence in implementation. And that excellence in implementation, as you said, we need everybody, private sector. And I just want to add, a private sector here is not just big companies. The informal sector actors with their small businesses, with their small acres of land, cultivating, adding value, and serving a whole community. Those are forgotten private sector actors. And so this implementation calls for citizens to rise to the occasion and take the rightful place as the core constituency of implementers. Because one of the biggest challenge that I think it never even discussed in the continent, any little thing, is government. Of course, government have a place, a space, a huge responsibility to create the enabling environment, but government doesn't implement. It's ordinary citizens like us who do so. And so we need to play our part by using the policies that are already in place, familiarizing ourselves with them, and starting to implement them and leveraging the information age. We are connected here on Twitter Space to discuss. So we need to leverage the information age, learn, connect with people who are already doing things, and learn to retool our skills and equip ourselves with skills to implement the elements that are in the policies. We have the NDCs. Countries have ratified it. We know that clean energy and sustainable agriculture are priorities that constitute over 70% of NDCs in every country. And then we need to follow up with legislators in your community and constituency that you voted for, and with targeted demands of specific kinds of incentives that are needed to expand small-scale enterprises. It's something that we have to do. Just writing and tweeting about it without being part of pushing for these things in your community, nothing will happen. And beyond citizen responsibility, the states of government need to take leadership in buffering economies against emergencies by providing policy incentives that are targeted to young people. That said, let me come to your question. UNEP role is threefold. First, to provide the best science that can inform policy. And second, to inspire action leveraging on science. And third, to convene member states so that at least they can be able to take the decisions that can advance environmental transformational development. When it comes to what UNEP has been doing, UNEP championed what is called ecosystem-based adaptation. And now it's expanded to nature-based solutions. And this demonstration of these nature-based solutions is happening across the continent. One of the things that I have noticed is that the pockets of success stories across the continent, if it's not happening in one's community, then it's not happening, which is not true. And that is why spaces like this, for example, we're working with the Buganda Kingdom, and a kingdom of 12 million people have taken up nature-based solutions and have tapped into climate resilience of cassava. What we then do is to take the data, bring the data, and share that data through what we call the Global Adaptation Network and the Ecosystem-Based Adaptation for Food Security Assembly. It is up to each and every one of us to look for this information and infuse into what we do in our capacity. And excellent work you are doing. And take the guidelines and see how do they align to what you do, so that at least that's how impact can be brought to scale. The second aspect is this aspect of plastics. There are amazing opportunities in the plastic space where during the March UN Environment Assembly, there was a decision that was taken by the global community to formulate a legally binding agreement on plastics. And that negotiation is currently ongoing. But as that is happening, Kenya was actually a pioneering country that banned single-use plastics, that then catalyzed space to give birth to this discussion. That we need to appreciate. I know we don't appreciate progress. And I always say that if we don't appreciate progress as a continent, we will never make progress. And I keep saying this, and I'm never even listened to. Then the other aspect is that young people in their own right across the continent, and I'm really inspired by what I see, are turning plastic waste into plastic blocks, which are replacing bricks and blocks. And they're also turning plastic into apparels, plastic, turning them to bags, and turning waste to briquettes, turning waste to biofertilizers. That we guide, that we provide and document the data and provide the best science and all that. That's UNEP work, catalytic. But the most important aspect that we do is inspiring young people. How do we inspire them? Bring the data, provide the capacity development through training, through guiding them so that at least they can be able to formulate local solutions. We're working with youth who are now taking up biogas and turning agricultural waste into biogas, and the slurry from that coming in the form of biofertilizer, they're selling it and making money. But that data then is to help inform policy and engage government so they can put physical incentives in place. In Kenya, for example, your finance bill of 2021 had physical incentives on taxes, taking off taxes on biogas and briquettes. I don't even know how many people knew about it, and it expired. So what I am trying to say, and I'm really glad you brought this up, is that there are low-hanging fruits that can be tapped into, but sometimes we want to see something big before we can believe that something is happening. But we need to tap small, do what we can do while thinking big, but at the same time, make sure we bring the data. If a mother can reduce her post-harvest losses by using a solar dryer, document that. If they can save 10 shillings as a result of selling dried tomatoes or dried vegetables, document that. Make the case why that climate action solution is important so that you can force for physical incentives, especially tax breaks, to be put in place so that more young people can get into that business of fabricating solar dryers. And that responsibility rests on you and me and everybody. So because I want that this discussion of what is organization B doing or organization C doing should stop. It should be, what is Richard Munang doing? What is Queen doing? What is Anne doing? What is Chebe doing? When we bring all that collective effort, because even if you are in an institution and you're not passionate to also do something bigger, we will all be, institutions are people, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that if we collectively see ourselves as solution providers and that we are part and we are a piece of the solution, imagine 7.8 billion people in the world just be a piece of the solution, the world will transform. And imagine 1.4 billion citizens of Africa. That will transform. And that's the kind of narrative I push. I can see Kobu Singh. Yeah, introduce yourself.
Yes, Rose Singer here. A Ugandan climate activist, and really great. I came across this space and decided to join for a bit. Interesting to hear all the conversations, especially inspiring ones. And I think I really had a question regarding, since we're talking about climate opportunities, as an activist, I've realized, and I'm really inspired by what young people are doing in Uganda and all over the world, but also recognize that there's lack of political will. And given the urgency of climate change, we really need to see our politicians on our side. And it's tending to be quite hard because some of them don't even don't understand the whole of this climate action agenda. And those ones who understand, they promise different things today and act differently tomorrow. And we're still struggling to ensure that young people are represented in decision-making rooms and policy discussions and development and implementation. But it's still a journey. We appreciate that it's happening, but it's very slow. But in terms of political will, like talking as a Ugandan, I really feel that it is a bit of a gap if we don't have like really strong political will and ambition to act on climate change and transition to clean energy and build adaptive capacity. So if we don't have that, then the opportunities are quite limited. That us young people and other young people will continue pushing, of course, acting at different levels. But things like acting at national level or whereby opportunities are open, I envision like a national youth climate fund and a global youth climate fund, but such things will be hard to achieve or to attain if we don't have like political will. So my question to Aaron here, you could respond through a tweet, because I don't think there's one answer to it. Like, what can we actually do to get the policymakers and
Good
politicians
evening,
on the
everyone.
side of
My
young
name
people
is
and on the side of
Tuliatunga Isaac, and I'm
No,
a
please,
climate activist. Well, I have
please, before
just
you come in, hello. Yeah,
joined
please, just hold on.
activism
Just
because
hold on.
initially I was
Hold on.
doing political activism.
Yeah, Isaac, just hold on.
I've
I will
started a
finish
few
with
projects.
Kopiting and then you will get
Last
over.
month I was in Western Uganda, sensitizing.
Yes, Kopiting, I think before I get to Isaac, thanks for your question. Let me start by saying this.
Right now I'm back in Kampala and I'm still doing the same.
Richard, you could mute.
But the challenge that I'm facing,
Dr. Munang, you
I
could
don't
just
have
mute
any
Isaac.
Just mute
organization
Isaac.
at the
Yes,
moment.
I have muted Isaac, but
I
he
don't know
keeps
why
on muting.
my microphone is off and on.
No,
But
Isaac,
what I'm
can
saying,
you wait, please?
at the moment, I don't have any
Anyway,
organization. So colleagues who are here, I think they can guide me on which organization I can join so that I can proceed and continue with my activism, because at the moment I'm doing it independently. And I'm requesting my fellow members here, maybe you can go and follow me up and we keep discussing and guiding each other about activism.
Okay, Isaac, thank you. Thank you very much. I've heard you, then we'll get back to you.
That's what I had to say. Maybe I'm going to be.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, Rose, to your question, let me start by saying this. The point is this. I really hope that this can be taken in good faith. I mean, this is a conversation. Uganda is one of the countries, I think it was in
I don't know that you guys
2021.
are hearing me because my microphone is off
Isaac,
and on.
Yes, Isaac, we got you and we are going to respond to you. So I am actually just responding to the first question that came from Ruth. We will get to you. I got your question, and your question was simple, that you want help because you have created an organization and you want to join other people's organizations to learn. Is that correct? So that will be responded to. Then Rose, to your question, I think Uganda in 2021 actually had their climate act. That's progress. You have a national framework, legal framework for climate action. Uganda have finalized their updated NDCs. This is the point. There is policy in place, and I have said this. Let's not feel powerless, to be very honest, because I think I see young people sometimes feeling power. You have a lot of power, to be very honest. Not power in talking about regime change or that. That's not what I'm talking. I'm talking power with what you can do to make difference in people. I mean, differences in to create a difference in people's life. There is, please, if you are not talking, please mute yourself. The legislation in place and your NDC and nationally determined contributions have very clearly defined aspects that you can be able to take action. What do you have to do? Uganda is actually a very unique country. I know a thing or two because we work there. And we've worked with the Buganda Kingdom. Why don't you leverage the Village Savings and Loans Association and bring a group of your friends so that at least you can be part of that, join PEOSA, and then we've actually worked with them to develop what is called a climate financing credit facility, where you can be able to take a loan at a very simple low interest rate. And you can be able then to start creating your own enterprise of turning agricultural waste. We can train you through the framework of a PEOSA. But you must be able to train that structured, accountable system to do so. So somehow, when we don't tap into this, especially on the enabling policy framework, let me tell you, there will never be enough money to be able to drive climate transformation. From my experience and from where I sit, I can tell you this for free. The 100 billion that was promised since 2009, where is it today? So the point I'm trying to say, let's leverage the limited opportunities we have to tap into that and start creating solutions, because you have a market which is the informal sector market that is worth 300 billion US dollars that is not even been tapped into. We wait and sit and wait for what doesn't come, and somehow we get limited in terms of what we can showcase. So showcasing simple actions with data and making a financially viable case out of that can help you advance yourself. So my point is simple. Don't be powerless. Leverage the enabling policy. Read the Uganda Climate Act. If you haven't read it, I've read it. Look at the nationally determined contributions. The key is for Uganda to ensure that it moves towards a low emissions development pathway. And sustainable agriculture is key. Clean energy solutions, briquette making, to be able to provide clean cooking solutions to people is high. Look at that. Look at how you can be able to be trained and the gaps you have, and we can take it from there. Every young person across the continent, when you want to start to engage, start from your position of strength and leverage. This is what I am doing. This is the gap. Then now you are in business, right? People will listen to you. When you come and say that, I'm not talking this directly to you, Ruth. I mean, it's a conversation. When we say, "Oh, the world is collapsing and my government is not doing anything," who is government? You are part of the government because you are citizens in which are governed by the government. So you are part of the ecosystem in your country. So what are you doing with what is there so that it can be perfected? So this is it. And thanks a lot for that question. So I was talking to a broader constituency of young people, not necessarily you, but I thank you for bringing that question. Yes, I can see. Then to Isaac's question, Isaac, I think I was not necessarily the one to answer your question, right? I think maybe Ruth will help me answer you. Ruth, please answer Isaac's question. Ruth, can you answer Isaac's question? If you can, please.
I'd gone back to listening mode. Yes, Isaac, there's quite a number of opportunities you could join. I sent you a tweet. I tagged you in your tweet. There's the Climate and Biodiversity Initiative, which is one of the initiatives that I'm also working hand in hand with. There's Friday for Futures Uganda. There's Rise Up Movement and the Uganda chapter. There's a lot. You just need to Google, just follow a few accounts here and identify which one resonates a lot with you, and you join that one. So you're welcome to the activism world, and we're really happy to hear that you're interested in saving the planet and saving all the people.
Thank you so much, Ruth. That's really wonderful, and thank you for the good work you do. So, Isaac, your dreams have been answered. So, engage with Ruth, and she will take it from there. I think I'll give the floor now, guys. We have 15 minutes to start running up. Steve, Aristo, Brian, um, Abraham. I will start with who was first? Was it you, Abraham? Let me start with Abraham and then work backwards. Yes, Abraham. Keep it brief,
Yeah,
please, if possible.
thank you very much. I'm going to look for Ruth and then I get some guidance and I see how I can join. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Isaac. Abraham, it's your turn. Unmute yourself, please. So if Abraham is not there, then I go to you, Brian.
Thank you so much, Dr. Munang. Let me first start by thanking my colleague Rose, because I think she asked a very important question, as well as thank you for organizing this session, because it's really critical for us as young people to be having this conversation with people in the space. And just to highlight what you are answering on in regards to Rose's question, mine would fall in line with, I think, just to encourage her, but also to say that what I've noticed in the space is that young people or people working on different initiatives across that cut across climate issues cannot be recognized by governments, mainly because most of us are working in a silo. So what I've realized with working with part and parcel of the government of Kenya is that you have to come in as a collective. Yeah, there's no way I'm going to approach the cabinet secretary today as Brian, and then tomorrow Rose will approach them, and then tomorrow Steve will approach them. So as much as you're working as a silo, trying to create our nature-based solutions that are going to come and solve some of the challenges you're facing with climate issues, then we also need to come together as a team and create a commission or something that can come in that can speak for all young people or all nature-based people working on biodiversity, nature-based solutions, plastic pollution. So we have to go there with one voice, and that's the only way the government can be able to engage with you. Yeah, as young people or people working in the space. Also, just to commend the conversation, because I feel like it's really needed, and we need to start empowering not only young people but even the women in the society that we have, and the young people and the children as well, because the climate conversation is not just about the future generations but also the present generation as well. So I just wanted to highlight that, and thank you so much, Dr. Ari, for creating this conversation. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much, Brian, and thanks for adding voice and that clarification. Collective action is very, very important, and sometimes the ideas that young people are championing get lost just because they do not come under one umbrella. And that also goes for funds. I know they always are fund here that needed people in groups to assess, but most people were not coming in groups. So I think this is also another aspect, not only for young people, but for us Africans, sometimes we don't want to work in groups, and that's why I keep using these words: cooperatives, chamas, because they organically get formed, and if you can engage such to be able to propel your message, then a lot of people will listen to it, because there is strong power in collectivism as compared to individualism. However, we are getting there. But Brian, that was really a very wonderful contribution. And we are going to do this. I will create time every weekend so that we have this conversation on climate opportunity, especially now. We need this. We need this, and we will keep going. Yes. Let me get to Aristo.
Thanks a lot for having us, Dr. Munang. Just a quick one. I want to approach the discussion in just two angles. First, I'll want to just talk about the UNEP. The UNEP in Nairobi is actually the headquarters.
Maybe you introduce yourself, where you are coming from. That question of UNEP seems to be coming only from one country.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I'm facing from Germany. I'm in Germany, but I come generally from East Africa, Rwanda and Kenya, but I'm in Germany, and I've also had an opportunity to be at the UN headquarters in Geneva for some graduate program that usually happens annually. But I want to point in that the UNEP in Nairobi, it's actually the headquarters of United Nations Environmental Program. So globally, this is the headquarter. So I'll want to then ask one question relating to international relations, and then also maybe one other question relating to smallholder farmers. So for me, I'll want to ask, I think there are environmental subsidies in Europe. So how do you put the farmers in Europe who are actually having environmental subsidies against farmers maybe in our countries like Kenya or Uganda, or all African countries, or Southeast Asia farmers who are also really smallholders, and often, as you said, also I can echo you that often they're not called on the table to discuss the topics that actually um, are actually on the decision platform that will affect them as farmers also. So how do we compare the two farmers who are highly subsidized in Europe, plus the farmers actually who don't have the subsidies back probably in Africa? And then thanks a lot also to learn that there are a lot of actually environmental policies that are put in place, and it's good that you're calling for a lot of like for us youth people actually, or young people, to actually know that we need to go out and act, or know that there's these policies that have been put in place. I also want to think digitalization is a key thing, and we should also think of to really include digitalization in our solutions. A lot of young people are on the digital devices. We can find solutions from the digital devices and probably leverage on a lot of other things on the Internet of Things or machine learning. I like the fact that you're also putting emphasis on data. I think as Africa, we really lack data, and that's the problem. We lack a lot of data, and comparing to another country where probably we're looking at World Bank data set, and we are comparing to a country, maybe to the US, maybe every data is collected of every person, what they're eating, what they're doing. Data is collected every day. But then we can combine the youth in our countries who are really young, and they are savvy tech, or they know how to do everything with tech. Then we can try to see how we can combine. Us youth can come in, find solutions for the environment or for the smallholder farmers, and collect the data. Like we can collect GPS data, special data, and then find a way of blending in the two. Then the policies can really be utilized, rather than the policies are made, as you said, funds are there, but people don't know, and people don't come actually to get the funds, or people don't apply to actually use their services. Please tell me just answer me on that one question, how the UNEP is really looking at comparing the two farmers who are highly subsidized versus the smallholder farmers. This really, really pains my mind when I sit here. And looking back in Kenya and looking to the German farmers, I really worry a lot about the Kenyan farmer. I wonder when they will really reach the point where the European farmer is, who is getting environmental subsidies, who is getting CAP, common agricultural policy subsidies. It's very lucrative to be a farmer here in Germany. Only professors, all big people, professors, doctors are farmers. But in our countries, it's the peasant people who are farmers. It's my old father who has who has only 3 goats, and he's the one who is called a farmer. Any rich person,
Good.
yeah, such a thing. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aristo. Before I answer your question, you look like a Spider-Man on your profile photo.
yeah. I am. This is my robotic. It's tech. I'm a robot from.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, just some humor in the pun intended. Anyway, yeah, thank you very much. I mean, that's true. So let me start by saying this. I am not really a fan of comparison in terms of structures. You see, the African context is very different from European context. Why do I say so? I started my synopsis by saying Africa is an informal continent, and I have facts to back this up. Now, let me come now to the subsidies. If you look at the African farmer today, I think the African farmer has been relegated to the bottom in the name of subsidies for production rather than providing the tools for the farmer to add value to be competitive in the global, both at national and continental and global. There is absolutely no way, even if you subsidize inputs in terms of fertilizers, which is a wrong thing to be subsidizing chemicalized fertilizer that destroy the very soils that are supposed to be enhance and nurture for sustainable production, we cannot copy that just because it's done elsewhere. There is organic fertilizer, and organic fertilizer can be subsidized from the perspective that if young people are actually engaged in producing biofertilizer, they can be given tax incentives. That is actually subsidies that are indirectly for the farmer. That's one. Two, a farmer produces, so what? The food gets spoiled. Kenya, for example, is losing how much? It's losing 500 million. That is 50 billion Kenyan shillings every year because of post-harvest losses. Why? Because there is no value addition to what is produced. Why can't subsidies come in to provide inputs like solar dryers, like solar fridges, so that these farmers can be able to access to add value to their food? Then they will be able to then not only store, but at the same time target markets to sell their produce and not be afraid of spoilage or wastage. This is the context of the continent. And somehow to not look at it from contextual reality and compare only with what a farmer is doing in Europe or in the United States, to me, is misplaced. And this goes back to the technology question. So your point is very valid, but we need to think out of the box within contextual reality. And I'll keep using this word contextual reality, because then producing at scale is not going to solve the Africa food insecurity crisis, because they will still get food waste, food lost. Producing at scale, matching it with the necessary instruments and equipment to add value will make sense for the continent. And at the same time, incentives might not necessarily just go to the farmer, but can subsidize the inputs and the additional inputs that can help the farmer add value. Those are the kind of thinkings of incentives and subsidization that the continent needs to think. Anything deviant of this, I can tell you, in the next 10, 20 years, we'll still be talking about over 257 people going to bed hungry and more poor people. Why are our farmers not rich? You cannot be rich when you only earn at production. You must add value. That's where the catch is. If you don't add value, then you are going to export employment and import unemployment. You export cash and import poverty. So this is the kind of narrative, and I'm happy that you asked that question, so that at least our young people. So when young people also ask me, we don't have farm, Dr. Ray, to do. Why do you need a farm for? My friend, the opportunities are in the value chain. Devise solutions to close the gap in the value chain and tap into the 48 billion US dollars. That is where we should be. So we cannot be discussing Stone Age discussions of production when we are forgetting where the billions are. Africa's agribusiness is worth 1 trillion in less than how many years from today? 8. How many Africans are tapping into it? This is where the young people, every young person should become a billionaire. And on digitalization, spot on. And I think this is, Brian, was it Brian or was it Chebet who brought this up? I think it was brought up, or Don Kim. He brought it up. Very important. And my argument has been the digitalization especially should go down to digitalize the structures that are closer to the people at the grassroots levels, communal cooperatives. If there is a mother, a group of chamas in northern Kenya, central, can their efforts and activities be digitalized so that at least their credit history can start to be kept, so they can be able to access money from microfinance institutions? This is where I really think, of course, Kenya is ahead. You have your M-Pesa here, but I think structures now like blockchain that can ensure immutability and traceability of their transactional ability to be able to have that credit history stored that can be used to showcase how they can be able to also assess loans and be viable in the capital space is what we must do. And I can tell you, this is what will transform Africa. Africa will not be transformed through these heavy talk and discussions. I believe in relatable solutions, relatability solutions that fit context, not necessarily how do we bring top-down heavy policy that are designed continental and global, but to make meaning to a Mamamboga at the grassroots level. That's what matters. And that way you will see transformational development. Thank you very much. I think Steve, you spoke, right? Did you? No, if you didn't, I think you requested. So I think I added you. If not, then who hasn't spoken? Jeffrey, I think I added you. You put your hand up. I did add you. I don't know. We have to start running up, guys. Actually, we are both time, but yes, Steve, I think over to you, and then we'll run up if there is any burning question, then we will see what we can do. Yes, Steve, over to you. Yes, go ahead, Steve. Keep it short, please, because we're out of time.
Oh, okay, sure. My name is Steve Misati. I'm currently an environmentalist and marine conservationist from Kenya. Now, I just want to reiterate on two things regarding climate opportunity. One is about the economic opportunity and the policy and government staff opportunity in regards to climate. So I've been doing conservation work, majorly mangrove restoration projects, and as we all know that mangroves are one of the nature-based solutions towards climate mitigation. And here down in the coast, I've seen projects like beekeeping opportunity, communities starting beekeeping projects while conserving the mangrove forests. People here down at the coast are really relying on the mangroves for woods and other things, basically to support their life, their living standards. But now there's these opportunities that come, like the beekeeping, which we are trying to implement them to to introduce them to this community so that they can shift from depending solemnly on mangroves and they can actually depend on the mangrove. So it looks like a win-win from an angle of climate action. You know, the mangroves they are not interfered with, and then the people are also gaining something from these beekeeping projects and opportunities that are happening in these communities. So now to the other aspect of policy, I believe there are a lot of opportunities regarding policy making. Now the issue comes down to participation, and here I feel a bit, stamped down because as a youth, majorly the policy and adaptation talks that I've really tried to engage in, the people there don't believe much from the youth. They think we are like babies, we don't know a lot of information. But I think if these opportunities could be hybrid, some aspect from elders and others from the youths, and that will be a mix in achieving whatever we are fighting or whatever we want to plan. So my question rather is, how do we maneuver from these tasks? How do we maneuver from these like we call, I don't want to use segregation or something, like how do we maneuver these backstabs whereby we as youths we feel like we are not fully engaging in this policy making, we're not engaging in these opportunities that we should also be part of. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve, and thanks for the good work you are doing on the beekeeping and actually using mangroves and restoring them and protecting. That's very good. Good work. I think your question is more on the divide between the old and the young. Look, the truth is that that's context. I'll come back again. The African setting cannot be ignored, right? I mean, you know, most of you were born after the 90s. I don't know whether that's true, but I believe the bulk of the youth in the continent were born after the 90s. There is this attitude sometimes for those who are older, right? Who, if you are not really coming in to fill a gap of what they are facing, they will think that you do not know anything. So, what I have always advised young people is to try to identify a gap and bring you a solution through a discussion to the community. For example, if they're using charcoal and they're used to it, if you bring briquettes, you think they're just going to embrace it because you brought it and that it's going to be cost effective and at the same time reduce. That's not, they're not going to. So you need to work with them, explain the benefits they're going to get, and work with them and make sure that at least as those briquettes are produced, you even give them to test and they will be the one giving you feedback. And then that way you will work. But if you just bring in a parachuting solution to some of them, they will think that you want to show that you are Ukoju. Since you are from here, I can use a bit of Swahili, right? Which is spicy sometimes to use. So that kind of thing is something that you will face when you grow older, when you graduate from youthful age to. We face that across the continent. But that said, what I always encourage young people to do, every community have a gap. This gap of fuel briquettes I keep talking here. Kenya, 14,000 from the data we have, 14,000 Kenyans die as a result of indoor pollution. They're using charcoal. There needs to be a lot of sensitization, and at the same time, young people producing briquettes from agricultural waste and marketing these and using the data to make the case for physical incentives, and at the same time, sensitize communities to pick that up. The same with solar dryers. The same with this digitalization we're talking about. So those solutions need to be done in such a way that community engagement is quite very clear, and that needs conversations, that need discussions, that need. So your idea in a community will not necessarily be embraced, even though it's coming to solve a problem. It's the cultural, stereotypical, stigmatized approach that have existed beyond even before we were born. That's okay. That's context. So how do we change it? We need to be strategic in and being creative and innovative and bring solutions in such a way that we can work with the community so they embrace it and that become part and parcel, and they will start even to demand it. And this need patience, persistence, consistency. So I usually say passion, persistence, and patience in the process. And patience doesn't mean that you have to stop and be waiting. No. Patience means you need to look at alternative solutions and be creative in trying to solve the same problems in different ways and engaging people so that at least you can get their buy-in. That's what I would say. I don't know whether there is any other person who want to speak. If not, I can see Sei. Sei, you have joined. We can't end without you saying something. Sei is actually one of the biggest advocates of climate change in Nigeria. Sei, if you can hear, you can join in and say something. But we've had a great conversation, guys, and I'm really, really excited that we've started this, and you guys have been phenomenal. You've provided perspective and at the same time showcase that we can be able to contribute ideas and make impact regardless. But there is one aspect that I want to end with. There is usually this question that comes up that Africa have got systemic challenges such as poverty and illiteracy exist. And the question is, how do we best reach the underprivileged youth and ensure that they all contribute to transformational climate action and long-term resilience? And I brought up this because it's what we're struggling with here. People will say, okay, you guys have access to Twitter. Yeah, the bulk of the youth are not on Twitter. You must use every space you have. If you are on Twitter, you use it. If you're not on Twitter, you try to get information from the person you've seen the person having it. So the point I want to make is this. On average, Africa literacy rate is at 70%. In some countries, the rate surpasses the global average of 90%. So the best way to reach the underprivileged young people in Africa is through what I call expanding the impact chain of solutions. What does this mean? Where those who are already literate, like all of us who are here today, we are literate. In some way, we must apply the knowledge and the skills in devising community solutions, and along the solutions chain, the less literate ones will then plug in to offer solutions and services. Let me just take a very typical example. In addressing post-harvest losses, right, we have over 50% of what is produced in Africa is lost. I said this before, 48 billion lost yearly. So if you get an idea from here today on decentralizing a solar dryer, and you went and engage a youth in a community who cannot even speak English, but that youth have some carpenter skills, you engage that youth and link that youth to be trained on how to fabricate a solar dryer. Because you heard about it here. I'm just giving an example. You've played your part. So what if each and every one of us engage our informal youth in one way or the other to teach them bee farming, to teach them nature-based solutions, application of fertilizer, organic fertilizer, agroforestry techniques? That way we'll start to cascade ideas, and that's why I call this impact chain of solutions. Until we start to inspire our informal sector youth and take the solutions from wherever we are, cities to the communities, that is the way we can have this ripple effect of a chain reaction. And if we don't do this, we will not move far. That's why this logic of innovative volunteerism that I developed was to be an incubation space where each and every one of us can play our role and ensure that we adapt our skill to intervene in this solutions chain where we have graduates, we have unskilled young people working together to deliver a solution to communities. And by this, ensure that at least the chain reaction of solutions cascade. That is the only way we can be able to tap climate opportunity and ensure those who are underprivileged can be able to also tap into the opportunity. And that's a way we can create a groundswell of solutions. Anything less than this will be sweet talk, sweet music, conferences, and complaining will continue. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate this is a family, and we'll be having a lot of discussions on this climate opportunity because it's high time we change the narrative. It was a pleasure, and do have a great time wherever you are. And I can see Sei is here. Sei, say something now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Richard Munang. I've been waiting for you to take a pause because I did not want to interrupt you. But you know, when you also speak, it also has to interrupt because there's a lot.
Yes, Sei, I think you come closer to your microphone. Come closer to your microphone. I think it's faint. We can't hear you very clearly.
Let's see. Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yeah, we can hear you, but there's some echo on the background. But at least just go ahead.
Okay. I was saying I did not want to interrupt you for two reasons. First, when you speak, it is very difficult to interrupt because there's a lot to learn. Secondly, you're making some very interesting points, and I was taking notes myself. I'd been away all evening. I was studying. I just came back, and I'm like, "Oh, Dr. Richard is having a space. Let me find out what exactly it's about." And I'm wowed by the quality of all that you have churned out today, particularly looking at climate opportunities. As you know, this is an area that Africa must invest in, and I'm glad that you are, leading that conversation. One of the things that I've come to discover recently, which I could just share as we round off, or 2 points I would like to share before we call it a
Great.
night. The first is in terms of, you've sort of, laid the basis for it, but I want to just go a bit further and talk about in carving out whatsoever opportunities, we must be deliberate about having dialogues among ourselves. And it is dialogue that leads to collaboration. It is collaboration that then calls for participation. And that is how we can make any change. So if we have issues and we are just complaining from, different parts of the world or different parts of the continent, until we come and say, hey, we want to have dialogue, either formally or informally, and we document those dialogues, and then we look at, we've documented the problems. Now let's look towards the solution. Let's bring about collaboration. What strength do you have? What skills do you have? What resources do you have? How can we bring it together? And it's in bringing it together that comes, the participation to say, yes, I am involved. Yes, I can do this. I will do this. And that's how we can see the needed change. Second point I want to make is we may just call it terminologies if we want, but the truth is many of us young people in the climate space right now, we must improve on our knowledge about these issues. If not, we will be shocked about how the world will leave us behind. Because no doubt about it, we're moving towards that transition. We're moving towards a new revolution that will be driven by climate solutions, from the energy space to the food security space to the climate health space. A lot, the list could be endless. So if we do not equip ourselves with adequate knowledge that can position us as solutions provider, that can position us as leaders in driving this change, we'll be shortchanging ourselves, because people that, for instance, are just, probably currently working around issues of education or working around issues of justice will be the ones saying, the world is moving towards climate. Let me go learn about it. And they will sort of overtake us. So if we say we're climate conscious people, we shouldn't stop at activism. Let's take some time, read about these issues, understand them, and see where we can fit in so that we can be part of those that will drive the change in the near future. Dr. Munang, I must thank you again for bringing me up.
Wow. I mean, what a beautiful summation, Sei. it looks like you are waiting to do what they say. He who laughs last laughs best, and you've really sealed it. And I don't have anything to say, but just to say thank you guys very much. This is a family, and every weekend I will try to create at least 1 hour so that we can have this conversation. And like you said, we need to be to learn to be intentional, to have dialogues, and out of those dialogues we can then be able to foster collaborations and learn and understand the issues, because the truth is that if we don't understand the issues, first of all, there is just transition at the moment, and I think we'll have a conversation under climate opportunity maybe next week, that we are just carrying the narrative without necessarily even understanding what is in it. Then there is carbon markets, then there is in financing, there's blended finance. So all these things, what does that mean in the context of our continent? And I will end again with what I said at the beginning. Africa is an informal continent. Let me say it again. Africa is an informal continent. You cannot have a continent with over 80% of the jobs created by the informal sector and call it an urbanizing continent. Yes, there is urbanization, but for who? Most of the people who live in these urban cities live in slums. They will not have the same amenities that others who actually live in urban centers will have. They don't have the money. They will still have to be addressed through the informal dimension and using the accessible structures that they can have. Unless we once this is a food for thought. Once you think from this perspective, then all the solutions you've been thinking, sometimes parachuted, will be revised. And there is nothing wrong to get solutions anywhere, but there is something wrong to not understand how those solutions can be contextualized to be relevant to that mother in a community who is going to bed tonight, not knowing how he or she is going to feed her 2, 3, 4 kids, and not even knowing how she will be able to feed them tomorrow. That should matter to us. And I can see my very good friend Kennedy is joining in late when we are running up. Kennedy, you coming in late when we are just running up, and I know you would have wanted really to say something. If you can just say something, 1 minute, please. I have been keeping the team here for a long time, and please just say something. We're talking about climate opportunity. If you have something to say, if not, then we will have this again next week. Almost same. We start at 9 o'clock for 1 hour to have a conversation on climate. It's been a very vibrant discussion, and we've learned a lot.
Dr.
I've learned a lot. Yes.
Yes, allow me to just thank you for these spaces, and also thank you for always using your Twitter platform and your LinkedIn to give us information about what is happening in the environment space, the work that UNEP is doing. You are doing a great job, and I would like to ask you to be holding these conversations more often. We will join, we will invite others to join so that we get solutions rather than just talk and talk and talk. You are doing a great job with your social media and with just informing us. And like Seish said, we as young people do not, yes, there is a lot of information about this conversation, but we never get to either read it or it's not made available to us. There are so many treaties, there are so many policies. We don't even understand what's happening in our own countries as an African continent. And so please continue giving us the information on your social media. I like to read your tweets. I like to read your posts on LinkedIn. Very informative, and you're doing a great, fantastic job.
Thank you so much, Queen. Thank you. Wow, that was like a vote of thanks. So when it comes, though you forgot to talk about the dancing. Yeah, yes, no, that is it, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate. So next rendezvous next weekend, we will talk about climate opportunity, but definitely just transition. I think it's a hot topic, and we'll dissect it, and definitely new ideas will come. Please share this conversation using your different social media handles so that others who did not join in can listen to it, and at the same time invite many more for our conversation next week. Have a great evening wherever you are, and please know that you are the best and keep the voice. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Thanks for having us tonight.